Welcome back to MVM. Today we're going to be taking a look at a gigantic game. If you couldn't already see in front of me, this game is huge, and this is only half the game. I am talking about Eastern Empires. Now, for those who aren't aware of the game Mega Civilization, this is kind of a re-implementation of that game. Mega Civilization has made a name for itself by being one of the most detailed and, dare I say, epic civilization games out there. This is a full day game where you could be playing this game for up to 12 hours with 18 different players. If you've never seen someone playing this game, it is quite the experience to both watch and play in it. They've got entire rooms sometimes set up with tables dedicated to their civilizations. It's a pretty cool thing. I mean, if you love civilization games, there's a really good chance that you've heard of Mega Civ. And if you're just kind of interested in what it's all about, well, Eastern Empires is here for you. This is not just a reprint of Mega Civilization. What they've actually done is they've taken that gigantic game and they've broken it down into little clusters. You have this game, which is Eastern Empires. There's also Western Empires, and these cover two different areas of the world. In a normal game, you're going to use both. So that when I say that this is only half the map, that's what I'm talking about. Now, this map here can support still up to 8 players, so you're kind of dividing that group down a little bit, but when you combine Eastern and Western, you still get that full ultimate civilization experience. But they've done a few things here with this game to streamline the process and actually to also cut the player count down, which is something that is unheard of when it comes to civilization. You can actually get that same Mega Civilization experience with only 3 to 4 players, which is kind of wild, actually. And I'll talk about how they do that. But before I do, let's talk about the actual game. So you're going to see here the map that comes with Eastern Wonders. Now, I've kind of got some things set up here just so you can see some tokens on the board and see what things are going to look like. This is a full-on simulation game, so you can expect the gameplay to kind of represent that. There are 13 phases in this game where you're going to go through everything from taxing your citizens to building cities to advancing your civilization, trading with other players, and all of that. Luckily, every player is going to get a player board that has a breakdown of all of those different sequences, as well as some information on the civilization they're playing. You're going to get a variety of pieces that are going to sit on top of your player board, including your cities, and then a number of tokens that are going to go into your treasury. You can move things from your treasury to your stock over the course of the game by taxing your cities, which requires you to build cities. You can also place ships out into the ocean as well. Each player is also going to have 2 cards or tokens. One is their turn order. It's going to tell them where they're going to go during the course of the game. And the other is going to tell you which civilization advancements you start with. You can think of these almost as technologies. These are the advancements that you gain that are going to give you some kind of special asymmetric ability. And there's a tech tree here. So these asymmetric starts are only going to lead you down branching paths of asymmetry. And there's a whole giant stack of these cards that comes with the game. So you're going to find your starting advancements and place them in front of you. However, you're going to be wanting to plan out your strategy and how you're wanting to advance your civilization. So you're not just worried about where you're going to go on the map, you also want to be worried about where you're going to go with these cards. This is a full 4X game, so you've got all the X's. You've got exploring on the map, you've got expanding control of your different territories, you've got exploiting the land for resources, which are called commodities, we'll talk about, and you're also exterminating. There is an element of combat in this game. But before I get ahead of myself, I do want to say that combat is not what this game is about. This is not a Twilight Imperium style game where your goal is to eliminate your opponents. In fact, combat in this game can be very detrimental to you, and often the winner is the one who managed to stay out of combat the longest through diplomacy or manipulation, however you want to call it, or just being in a really good position on the board and making use of that. So when you're taking these technologies or these civilization advancements, you're not necessarily wanting to build a combat engine. You're wanting to get cards that are going to really benefit the growth of your civilization, because you're benefiting over that growth in a couple of different ways, both via the census, which determines your total population, and if you can see over to the side, the archaeological succession table. Now this table, and you can see a smaller version of it here, is going to hold tokens from all the different civilizations, and it's going to track your progress to the end game, taking you through all of the different ages. if you look at the top, you're going to see the requirements to move on to each of the next ages. As you take your turns in this game, you're going to be moving on this table, trying to reach the end. If you reach the end, then you trigger the end of the game. It's not a race. You don't win. And in fact, it's very possible that multiple civilizations will hit this end game at the same time. But this is kind of the game's track of how long is left. This is completely player controlled. You can have some civilizations stall out and not really ever get to the Middle Bronze Age. And you can have some that make their whole goal to race to the end. Again, you still have to take several turns. You have to move up each one of these spaces, and you have to make sure that you have the requirements of each section in order to do so. So this is kind of another guide as to how you want to kind of plan your game. You want to try to hit these different sections because ultimately you're wanting to score the most points. And of course, expanding and things like that are going to get you a lot of points as well. Now, expanding doesn't just benefit you for points. You want to cover a lot of different territory. You're seeing all these tokens out here on the board, and these represent a variety of different things. Of course, you have your cities. You also have your population units. And these you can think of as like your troops or your units that are moving around the map. You can move them around in order to explore new areas or found new cities, but you can also use them to grow your population because the game is going to look at areas where you have multiple tokens, and you're going to get to add tokens to those areas, thus growing and thus increasing your presence on the census track. But what you're also doing is building out to those cities, which are going to grant you access to commodity cards. And there are a lot of these different stacks of these cards that represent all the different resources in the game. This is kind of a set collection element. Every single one of these resources has a few numbers on the bottom. That's how much value you're going to get for trading these in. For example, if I trade in 8 bone, I'm going to get 64 value of trade in. And this is important because that's how you're going to afford a lot of those city advancements and things like that. So collecting these resources is a huge part of the game. In fact, a lot of the game's playtime revolves around these resources because what you're trying to do is trade with other players. That's a huge thing. So you want to make sure that you have a ton of these because every turn that you can draw, you're looking at the number of different cities, and that's determining how many different piles of resources you could draw from. Of course, it's not one stack. It's not flax in a pile, salt in a pile. You're actually going to have different types of these commodities in each pile, and you're going to draw one from each. Mixed into that are Calamity cards, which are kind of going to put a little bit of a twist in the game. I'll talk about those in a second because you're actually going to be able to slip these cards to your opponent and cause calamities for them, which is not great. But again, you're wanting to make these trades with other players. You're going to want to try to gamble. Maybe you're going to get what you want, maybe you won't. Because anytime you make a trade, your opponent has to, legally, tell you 2 items that are in the trade. And they have to be honest about that. But beyond that, if they're trading you 5 cards, there are 3 cards that you don't know what you're going to get. You could do the same thing with them. You have to trade at least 3 cards, but you can make any kind of trade deals that you want. And this game is all about that element of negotiation and diplomacy. So trades are great, but there's also elements of, well, don't come into my territory. Don't attack me. Please leave this city space alone. Please move your ships out. Please move some of your population. Please come to my aid later. I mean, there is no limit to the amount of negotiation, except, of course, the time limit. The game actually recommends capping these discussions just in case they tend to go a little long. People can get really into it. They don't want to make any deal but the best deal for them. Well, putting a timer on this phase kind of makes you have to come to those arrangements a little quicker, or else you don't get any trades at all, which is very bad for you because you have to turn in these sets of cards to gain those progress points, to gain those civilization technologies, and that's all going to help you progress through the game. So earlier, when I said that this was a real simulation, I mean, I meant it. This game is very in-depth, which is awesome. I mean, if you're a fan of civilization games like Sid Meier's Civilization, or even some games that have civ building elements, I mean, this is the grandfather of all of them, if you couldn't see. Now, let me get back to those calamities. You can actually slip these calamities into other players because when you're giving them their hand, like I said, there's 3 cards that they don't know about. You could slide a calamity into them. There's a whole chart of the different calamities and what they do. And of course, they're awesome player aids, and you've got a lot of these different player aids. So this is going to tell you what all the calamities do. And you're going to have a person go through each calamity and call for it. And if somebody has that calamity in their hand, that calamity is going to trigger. So it's not necessarily a great thing to happen. Now, some of those calamities can't be traded. You're just going to draw them because, like I said, you just draw from the stack. You might end up getting a calamity, in which case you just keep it in your hand and you're going to have to deal with the results of these calamities. The effects of these calamities are sweeping. I mean, there are, like I said, a ton of them. They can do a wide variety of different things. They can mess with your cities on the board. They can force you to move back on this succession table. I mean, there's, like I said, no real limit. But you still want to trade. You're going to have to risk it. That's part of the game, is risking those calamities when they trigger. Now, each of these phases is done in order. Like I said, you're going to go through all 13 phases. And you're going to do that turn after turn after turn, slowly expanding over the course of the game. Now, of course, on the game board here, there's a lot of information to take in as far as expanding. You're going to see a lot of numbers that indicate how many population you can have there. You're going to see some spaces marked with different starting locations, different symbols that indicate whether a city is beneficial to be built there or not. All of that is just kind of part of learning the game and learning the strategy of where you want to go, whether you want to turtle up, whether you want to spread out. That's all based on your strategy. I mean, there's really no wrong way to play this game. You can play this game without ever entering combat, like I said. You could just be the diplomatic master that sits behind. Now, that's how the game works when you have a full player count, because trading becomes so important. However, you're not going to get that same trading element when you play a smaller game, when you play with 3 or 4 players, which is why there never was a 3 or 4 player version. However, Eastern Empires does that. You see here these 2 boards, this giant board that makes up the Eastern Empire. This whole side of the board actually can flip over, and now you're seeing this whole like trading board, which is brand new for Eastern Empires. This is going to be populated with cards, and it's actually going to allow you to trade your cards to the bank. And you're going to be placing these cards face down as well, and you're going to be drawing cards back up. So not only does this add a whole market, it also shrinks down the board. So when you're playing with 3 to 4 players, you've got a much smaller board to play on. So you're a lot tighter here. You're going to have to interfere with each other's areas. You're going to have to still negotiate. This makes the game a lot tighter, a lot smaller, and a lot more digestible for a 4-player game. You're not looking at an all-day game experience here. Now, like I said, there's just so much to this game. I haven't even really gotten into all the different civilization advancements. There are so many, and a lot of those civilization advancements give you special powers. Those special powers are either going to be ongoing, that will interact with different states of the game in different ways, but some of them are also triggered powers. Just at the end of your turn, you're going to get to look at all of your technologies that have those powers, and you're going to get to use them all. That can really change the game, and of course there's so many of those. You'll see a couple of them up here on the screen as I'm talking about them. But once you're done using all the special abilities, the game is going to continue. You're going to go finish through those 13 steps. Then you're going to repeat them all. You're going to continue repeating those 13 steps until you reach the end of the game. And again, this is not a race. Once you reach the end, it is not a winner. It is just the end of the game. You're still going to finish the round, and then you're going to add up all the victory points that you've accumulated in a lot of different ways. Victory points from those advancements, victory points from your presence on the board, victory points from your census. So all of those things are going to kind of add together to determine your final score. Whoever has the highest score at the end is going to win. Now, I hope that was enough to kind of give you a brief overview of what Eastern Empires is and how it all comes together to form that huge civilization game. There is a lot to this game, so I do recommend checking a look at their Kickstarter page to see the kind of different breakdowns. I know there's some other videos. John Gets Games did a whole video just on this market board and how cool it is, because it really does change up the game and allow you to play this game at 3 to 4 players, which is completely unheard of. So if this looks like a game that's interesting to you, or if you've always wanted to play a game like Mega Civ but didn't think you could just handle that huge commitment, this is a great place to start, because not only does it offer this smaller version of the game, this actually has a learn to play guide that's actually going to talk you through your first game at 3 players. It's going to give you guides for every step of the way, and yeah, it's kind of going to lead you on rails a little bit, but I played through that. It took about 2 hours. It was very informative, and by the time I got to the end of it, I felt completely comfortable starting a game. I think that's absolutely awesome. I think more games of this caliber need those guides that kind of just gently get you into the game. So this is on Kickstarter right now, and it's actually entering into its final 48 hours as of the time of this video. So take a look at that Kickstarter page before it goes away. Otherwise, you can check it out in the Pledge Manager whenever that opens up. You won't want to miss out on this one. There's actually options that you can get Western and Eastern together, so you can just go straight into the giant Mega Civilization game. And I didn't even talk about, if you are a fan of Mega Civilization. If you already own Mega Civilization, they've done a lot of tuning to this game, not just the addition of the market board, but this is definitely like a new addition with a lot of new love for that source material. So if you have been waiting for both of these to come out so you can complete your collection, jump on it. You probably already know, you don't need me to tell you. This is Eastern Empires. Check it out. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from the players out there that have played Mega Civ before. And if you're a fan of Civ games, what is holding you back? Jump in. Now is the time. But thank you all so much for watching. And until I see you again, keep having fun at the table.
Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.